The Akwamu people, a significant subgroup of the Akan, are one of the largest ethnic groups in Ghana and the broader West African region. Known for their rich culture, intricate social structures, and powerful kingdoms, the Akan people have shaped the history and cultural landscape of West Africa for centuries. Among these Akan states, the Akwamu kingdom emerged as a formidable power during the 17th century, wielding influence that extended beyond the boundaries of present-day Ghana. Traditionally located in southeastern Ghana, particularly in the eastern region with their historical capital at Akwamu, the Akwamu's history is one of resilience, power, and adaptability, reflecting the broader dynamics of Akan politics, economics, and culture. As we delve into the history of the Akwamu people, their origins, rise to power, military dominance, economic activities, cultural practices, and eventual decline all contribute to their enduring legacy. The Akwamu trace their origins to the Bono state, initially part of the larger Akan group. The Akan people, who speak various dialects of the Akan language, are believed to have migrated from the Sahel region into the forested areas of West Africa around the 11th century. The Bono state, located in what is now the Brong-Ahafo region of Ghana, was one of the earliest Akan states, known for its gold wealth and centralized political structure. Over time, various Akan groups began to migrate southward, seeking new territories and resources. Among these migrating groups were the ancestors of the Akwamu, who eventually settled along the banks of the Black Volta River. The exact timeline of their migration is not well documented, but by the late 16th century, the Akwamu had established themselves as a distinct group with a defined territory. As they settled in their new location, the Akwamu gradually began to consolidate power, establishing the foundations of what would become a powerful kingdom. Their initial settlements were strategically located, allowing them to control key trade routes and interact with neighboring groups. The Akwamu's early history is marked by their ability to adapt to new environments, form alliances, and lay the groundwork for their eventual rise to power. The 17th century marked a period of significant growth and expansion for the Akwamu kingdom. Under the leadership of King Ancestus Roku, the Akwamu embarked on a series of military campaigns that extended their influence over a vast territory. Ancestus Roku, often credited with establishing the Akwamu kingdom's power, was a formidable ruler known for his strategic acumen and military prowess. The Akwamu capital was initially located at Ninawes near present-day Nsawam before it was moved to Akwamu. From their capital, the Akwamu kings ruled over a diverse population, including not only their Akan kin but also other ethnic groups they had subjugated through conquest. The Akwamu kingdom's territory at its height included parts of modern-day Ghana, Togo, and Benin, reflecting the extensive reach of their power. One of the key factors in the rise of the Akwamu kingdom was its control over important trade routes, particularly those along the Volta River. The Volta River served as a major artery for trade, connecting the interior regions to the coast, where European traders were active. The Akwamu leveraged their strategic location to dominate trade in the region, particularly the trade in gold, ivory, and slaves, which were highly sought after by European merchants. Military and political dominance. The Akwamu kingdom's military power was the cornerstone of its rise to prominence in the 17th century. This power was not merely a product of brute force but was underpinned by sophisticated strategies, advanced weaponry, and an intricate understanding of regional geopolitics. The Akwamu leaders understood that to build a kingdom that could withstand external pressures and internal dissent, they needed a formidable military force that could protect their interests and project power across a wide territory. One of the key factors that set the Akwamu apart from many of their neighbors was their early and extensive acquisition of firearms. As European powers, particularly the Dutch, Danes, and English, established trading posts along the Gold Coast, they brought with them advanced military technology, including muskets, cannons, and ammunition. The Akwamu were quick to recognize the potential of these new weapons and actively engaged in trade with Europeans to obtain them. The Akwamu's access to firearms gave them a significant advantage over neighboring states that still relied on traditional weapons like spears, bows, and arrows. The Akwamu army became one of the first in the region to be equipped with muskets, which drastically increased their firepower and effectiveness in battle. The ability to deploy firearms in large numbers allowed the Akwamu to dominate the battlefield, as they could inflict heavy casualties on their enemies from a distance before engaging in close combat. The Akwamu military was highly organized, with a hierarchical command structure that ensured discipline and coordination during campaigns. The king, or Rodinaho, was the supreme commander of the army, but day-to-day military operations were overseen by war chiefs and seasoned commanders who had proven themselves in battle. These commanders were responsible for training the troops, planning campaigns, and leading soldiers into battle. Akwamu military tactics were a blend of traditional Akan warfare and innovations introduced through contact with European military practices. Akwamu soldiers were trained in both hand-to-hand combat and the use of firearms, making them versatile fighters capable of adapting to different battlefield scenarios. The Akwamu also employed psychological warfare, using intimidation and surprise attacks to demoralize their enemies before engaging in direct combat. One of the key strategies employed by the Akwamu was the use of rapid, coordinated attacks that overwhelmed their opponents. They would often launch surprise raids on enemy settlements, capturing strategic locations before their opponents had a chance to organize a defense. This approach not only secured quick victories but also prevented prolonged conflicts that could drain the kingdom's resources. The Akwamu kingdom's expansion was driven by a combination of military conquest and strategic alliances. Under the leadership of powerful kings like Ancestors Roku, the Akwamu embarked on a series of campaigns to expand their territory and bring neighboring states under their control. These campaigns were not random acts of aggression but were carefully planned operations aimed at securing key resources, trade routes, and strategic positions. One of the first major conquests of the Akwamu was the Gi state, located along the coast near present-day Accra. The Gi people were an important trading partner of the Europeans, and control over Gi territory allowed the Akwamu to dominate the lucrative trade routes that linked the interior regions with the coast. By subjugating the Gi, the Akwamu gained access to European goods, including firearms, and positioned themselves as a dominant power in the region. The Akwamu also extended their influence eastward into the lands of the Yu and Adami people. These groups, who lived in the coastal and inland areas to the east of Akwamu territory, were incorporated into the kingdom as vassal states. The leaders of these vassal states were allowed to retain some autonomy, but they were required to pay tribute to the Akwamu king and provide military support when called upon. The subjugation of these neighboring states was not just a matter of military conquest, it also involved the imposition of Akwamu political and cultural systems. The Akwamu often installed loyal chiefs or governors in conquered territories, ensuring that these regions were governed according to Akwamu laws and customs. This process of cultural assimilation helped to solidify Akwamu control and reduce the likelihood of rebellion. The Akwamu's military dominance was closely linked to their control of key trade routes, particularly those along the Volta River. The Volta River was a major artery for trade, connecting the gold-rich interior regions with the coastal trading posts established by European merchants. By controlling the river and the surrounding territories, the Akwamu were able to regulate the flow of goods, including gold, ivory, and slaves, which were highly valued by the Europeans. Control of trade routes was not only a source of wealth but also a tool of political leverage. The Akwamu could dictate terms to European traders, granting or withholding access to inland markets depending on their own strategic interests. This control over trade allowed the Akwamu to maintain a steady supply of firearms and other European goods, which in turn reinforced their military superiority. The Akwamu also used their economic power to form alliances with other states and European powers. These alliances were often cemented through trade agreements that benefited both parties. For example, the Akwamu might agree to supply a European trading post with slaves or gold in exchange for a steady supply of firearms and ammunition. These alliances helped to stabilize the region and protect Akwamu interests against rival powers. Takeover of the Danish castle at Christiansborg. The Akwamu's takeover of the Danish castle at Christiansborg is a remarkable episode in the history of the kingdom, reflecting both their military prowess and strategic acumen in dealing with European powers. This event took place in the early 1690s and is a vivid example of how African states like the Akwamu could assert dominance even over European colonial forces when the circumstances were in their favor. During the 17th century, European powers were increasingly involved in the West African coast, seeking to establish trading posts and forts to secure their interests in the lucrative trade of gold, ivory, and enslaved Africans. The Danes were among these powers, and they established several forts along the Gold Coast, modern-day Ghana, the most prominent being Fort Christiansborg, located in what is now OSU, a suburb of Accra. Fort Christiansborg was built by the Danes in 1661 and became the center of Danish operations in West Africa. The fort served not only as a trading post but also as a base for the Danish administration and military presence in the region. Control over such a fort was of immense strategic importance, as it allowed the holder to dominate trade in the surrounding area and to influence local politics. By the late 17th century, the Akwamu had established themselves as a powerful kingdom in the region, and their influence extended to the coast, where they interacted with various European traders, including the Danes. The Akwamu were particularly interested in acquiring firearms and other European goods, which were crucial for maintaining their military superiority. In the early 1690s, a dispute arose between the Akwamu and the Danish authorities at Christiansborg. The exact nature of the dispute is not entirely clear, but it may have involved trade disagreements, territorial encroachments, or the treatment of Akwamu subjects by the Danes. Whatever the cause, the Akwamu king, King Ansasasraku, decided to take decisive action. Rather than launching a full-scale assault on the fort, which was well defended and equipped with European cannons, the Akwamu employed a more sophisticated strategy. They managed to infiltrate the fort by gaining the trust of the Danish garrison. This infiltration was likely facilitated by the presence of Akwamu subjects who were already working within the fort, possibly as interpreters, traders, or even soldiers in the Danish service. Once inside the fort, the Akwamu launched a surprise attack, overpowering the Danish defenders and seizing control of Christiansborg. The Danish governor and several key officials were taken hostage, while the remaining Danish forces were either killed or expelled. The Akwamu thus took control of one of the most important European forts on the Gold Coast, a feat that was unprecedented at the time. The capture of Christiansborg had significant implications for both the Akwamu and the Danes. For the Akwamu, it was a major victory that demonstrated their power and ability to challenge European colonial forces. The fort provided them with access to European goods, including firearms, and allowed them to control trade along a key stretch of the coast. It also sent a clear message to other European powers that the Akwamu were a force to be reckoned with. For the Danes, the loss of Christiansborg was a severe blow to their ambitions on the Gold Coast. However, they were eventually able to negotiate a return of the fort, likely through a combination of ransom payments, trade concessions, and diplomatic agreements. The details of the negotiations are not well documented, but it is clear that the Akwamu were able to extract significant concessions from the Danes in exchange for relinquishing control of Christiansborg. Decline of Akwamu power. The decline of the Akwamu kingdom was the result of a combination of internal and external factors that gradually eroded the power and influence that the kingdom had once enjoyed. While the Akwamu had risen to prominence through a combination of military prowess, strategic alliances, and control of trade routes, these same elements also contributed to their eventual downfall when circumstances changed. One of the key internal factors contributing to the decline of the Akwamu kingdom was succession disputes and internal strife. As with many monarchies, the process of selecting a new ruler after the death of a king often led to power struggles among the royal family and other influential factions within the kingdom. These disputes weakened the central authority and diverted resources away from maintaining the kingdom's military and economic dominance. The Akwamu kingdom was also affected by changes in the regional trade networks that had been a major source of its wealth and power. As European powers established more direct trade links with other coastal states and began to develop alternative trade routes, the Akwamu's control over key trade routes diminished. This loss of economic power made it more difficult for the Akwamu to maintain their military superiority and to exert influence over their vassal states and neighboring territories. The rise of other powerful states in the region, particularly the Asante Kingdom, also played a significant role in the decline of the Akwamu. The Asante, another Akan state, had emerged as a major power in the early 18th century, thanks to their own military successes and control over gold-producing regions. As the Asante expanded their influence, they came into conflict with the Akwamu, leading to a series of wars and territorial losses for the Akwamu. One of the most significant blows to the Akwamu kingdom came in the early 18th century when the Asante launched a series of military campaigns against them. The Asante, under the leadership of their king, Opoku were able to exploit the internal divisions within the Akwamu kingdom and defeat their forces in a series of battles. The Asante's superior military organization, combined with their own access to European firearms, allowed them to overpower the Akwamu and annex key parts of their territory. By the mid-18th century, the Akwamu kingdom had lost much of its former power and influence. While the Akwamu continued to exist as a political entity, they were no longer the dominant force in the region that they had once been. The Asante had become the preeminent power in the area, and the Akwamu were reduced to a vassal state, paying tribute to the Asante king. The decline of the Akwamu kingdom was further accelerated by the changing dynamics of the transatlantic slave trade. As European powers began to focus more on direct trade with coastal states and the establishment of their own colonies, the Akwamu's role as intermediaries in the slave trade diminished. This loss of economic power further weakened the kingdom's ability to maintain its military and political structures. Despite their decline, the Akwamu people continued to play a significant role in the history of the region. The legacy of the Akwamu kingdom is still evident in the cultural and political landscape of modern Ghana. The Akwamu chieftaincy remains an important institution, and the descendants of the Akwamu kings continue to hold positions of influence in the eastern region of Ghana. The history of the Akwamu kingdom serves as a testament to the dynamic and complex nature of West African history. It highlights the ability of African states to adapt to changing circumstances, engage with European powers on their terms, and assert their own sovereignty and power in the face of external pressures. The rise and fall of the Akwamu kingdom is a story of resilience, ambition, and the ever-changing nature of political power in the pre-colonial African context.